going to close the short sides first, 1 centimeter seam allowance down here on both sides. So off to the sewing machine, there we go. And you can see now I finally worked out how to get my camera to work lighter. This is a new camera and it was really dark before. So cut off your seam allowances so it's nice and small, because we are going to put a cam snap in there, and if it's really thick, partly where the cam snap is gripping it, it will come off or will not go in. So cut it really short and then iron the whole thing lengthways in half so it's nicely done. The first thing to do is to half your sweatshirt, and you will see that it's actually exactly on the seam there. And we're going to start the neckband where the placket starts. Here I'm just going to put my back onto the center back, which is obviously not the center back, but it's a center, you know, it's halved. And here you can see it goes just where the placket starts. And then I just stretch this and I work my fingers to the middle, and I'm going to put the pins all the way around, and you will have to adjust your pins very lightly. So what I do is I check not just have I halved it right, but does it look right when I'm done, because you can get this slightly wrong. I felt that this wasn't quite as tight and I had no idea why. So I just took it back out and I fiddled with it, and then I put it back in. And this time I used now my pins which go horizontal with a seam, because I was going to really overpin this and I wanted to make sure that I can see exactly what it is that I'm going to be sewing. And that's why the horizontal pins are sometimes the right choice, because just like putting a sleeve in, you need to see what it's actually going to be like, okay? So vertical pins don't quite do that. So once we've sewn it in, we're going to sew across here to then stitch in the placket as well. If you did that in one go and you just folded it over, it will just give a really ugly nose. It won't work as well. Trust me, it will always move. So check that there is the same gather across the length of the sleeves and then put it in. Now it sounds a little bit more complicated than it actually is, and the gist of it is make sure that it's even Steven and then sew it in. And I'm using a foot width seam allowance here, and not a centimeter, foot width. But I wanted to make sure that it looks good with cam snaps, because I know most of you are using cam snaps. So I'm working all my way around. And there you go. Beautiful to the end. And I make sure that nothing slips out here at the front. It always wants to do that, so I make sure it ends exactly where the placket starts. Beautiful. And now the next step is to fold over the placket really tightly. And now I can then pin this, and I'm turning it over to the other side. And I'm doing that because I can already see what I've stitched. It's not so easy to hit that sweet spot if you don't turn it over. So make sure that you do it from the underside, so to speak, so that you just go in that same stitching line, and it gives you an absolutely beautiful result like this. Now do the same on the other side. Again, really tightly wrap this round, but don't pull it further, just round very tightly where it meets the neckband. Turn it over, stitch it in. Excellent. Now when I turn this, they should both be the same length. It might be worthwhile checking quickly, just in case. And now we are going to overlock it. But here we are going to have a cam snap, possibly coming up a little bit higher, especially on the smaller sizes. So make sure that you cut the seam allowance back only where the placket covers it now. Don't cut it further in, because I am doing it here. Watch closely what I'm doing. No, I'm going too far. Can you see? No, that's not what you want. So let me show you how it's done properly. I sometimes do these things. I'm on autopilot. There. My placket starts, I go in, cut it off. There you go. That's what you want, so that when you turn it, you've got, you know, a nice overlocked edge here. Okay, you don't want that to be super skinny. So now I can go back to the overlocker, and I'm lining it up with a point on my lock. You can see here it's the Brother Lock 1034D. It's a very cheap machine, but it's done me for years. I've bought this machine over and over for school, and I've told everyone about this machine because it's cheap and cheerful, but it works. So if you can't afford a singing and dancing overlocker, I would recommend that you go on Amazon and you find it. Wait for a deal. I got mine usually for about 130 pounds, so $150 maybe. So now I'm going to just press this over my ironing board. Make sure a lot of steam goes into the fabric, and you hold in anything that you might have stretched. Stretched necklines aren't very sightly, so I'm just holding this nice and round, steaming it and giving this a good press, and that's it. Done. Neckline finished. Is absolutely beautiful, and it's actually not so hard. And of course, if you're on the course, I also show you how to do it when you want to just make a normal sweatshirt. That's not on YouTube, but you can find that in the course when you signed up for it. The next step is to do the top stitching on the opening. We haven't done that yet, so we're going to go in there now, starting at the lower end, and we're going to top stitch it up here. And because the front placket is a little bit wider than the back one, you should have no issue doing this. You can see it here. I moved my sleeve out of the way anyway. You see that in a minute, but it really shouldn't be necessary if you work this as you should, this thing. So I'm just going to put a pin there so I know up to which point I want to sew to, and then that will be right there. I'm starting on the underarm seam, and again stitch length 3.5 to 4, if not 4.5 depending on your sewing machine. And you come up and you use the same fixed point, of course, that you had before, only on the other side. And I'm going up to the point where I want to sew into my front piece, yeah, to get that 90-degree angle and to sew the placket in. So once I've reached that, I can put the needle down, I turn, and then I'm going to stitch across, and I can actually feel it. You don't even need to see it. It's right there, it's the edge. And because we've got that little bit more, it should be fine to stitch upwards without moving it out of the way, you know, like I'm doing here. But I wanted to go very carefully and do this. So I'm moving it all the way away. It's a bit like overkill. The advantage is, of course, I can see the 1 inch or 2.5 centimeter marking on my needle plate, and I can guide that along there. So that's maybe why you might want to do it, but you could also just mark this with a textile pen if you're not sure, you know, that you can go up straight, that you might veer off. Then you could mark that with a textile pen first and then follow that line. There's no reason to move it all the way out of the way like I'm doing here. Anyway, secure your stitches. If it's not transporting, you might just want to not secure the stitches, pull it through to the other side, the threads, knot them, and then pull them away into the seam that you've got there. And because I wanted to see what it looks like with 2 stitching lines, I'm just doing that. I'm going back down. I think it's not really necessary, to be honest. So, but that's up to you. You can put another stitching line like I've done here. You could also have 2 stitching lines as well, where you top stitch it onto the front, the sleeve. So that's up to you, however you want to do this.